So that Italian American man, I think, is connected to other Italian Americans in Washington and Oregon. And I think that that's where some of the danger has come from. Maybe not all of it, and I know not all of it, but there's this guy named Lee who is Italian American, and of some Italian Americans of the U.S., something like that club. And then come to find out, Rick Bacon, who looked white to me, Rick Bacon, the semi-retired FBI person who was living behind my grandparents, he's Italian American, and his wife works as a nurse in oncology, just like this doctor who raped me. His girlfriend worked in oncology as a nurse. And Rick Bacon, decided to live behind my grandparents after I met the Schneiders, who work with the Department of Justice, and possibly are connected to Middletons in a roundabout way. So after I felt, I think I don't know, I remember how I felt after I was raped, and on my birthday, and I remember I think I went into a state of shock, again, like a deeper state of shock, because I knew that the police had been around, and again, they were involved. So then I believe I did try to possibly even bring it to someone's attention, and had problems with that. I don't think I brought it up right away, but I know that people knew what had happened. There were a lot of people that knew what had happened to me and knew all of these things that were happening to me, and they were just, nobody was looking out for me. I mean, my family, different people may have wanted to, but they didn't know about everything that was happening, or some of them were intimidated. And as for a lot of other people that were out in the sidelines, I had no idea that they were looking in and making fun of the situation, and that it was going according to plan. So, that rape while I was incapacitated occurred involving police again, in the same way that it was occurring with other individuals in Oregon. It was the exact same thing, exact same pattern, exact same setup, and the exact same involvement with law enforcement, protecting and covering for what was going on. So, it was after that occurred, I believe, that my license was then blocked. I was obstructed from going back and forth, and Donna Ciaramella, also an Italian American, was getting out of paying the $50,000 that they knew I had coming to me for this injury. And it sort of makes me wonder why it was a Hispanic man that ran into me and targeted my car, when the only person that I talked to about my direction and location who was asking all the questions was Krista Schneider. And I don't really think she has a lot of Hispanic Mexican connections, but maybe somebody that she's connected to, for example, someone like the Bacons, who have Mexicans working for them in the orchard, or some other group, doesn't have to be the Bacons, some other group that had Hispanics that they knew to do something like that, who wanted to do something like that. Well, they did. I absolutely believe and know that that was not a mistake or an accident of hit and run. It was a planned hit and run. So I think that around that time my parents were being targeted as well and tortured, and I didn't know it. I think they had a lot of people putting pressure on them to not say anything, or who thought that maybe they were helping me in some way when they weren't. And I didn't understand that there were probably a lot of things going on where they were as well. So that's when the rape happened. It was October 22nd of 2004. And I was still commuting back and forth for college. And then I was blocked from doing that. So then I was stuck in Washington State, and they were just calling me a drug seeker and drug user and refusing to treat my migraines. That whole thing happened. And then it was, 9 months later, approximately, being tortured the whole time with migraines, increasingly severe migraines. And then all of a sudden, that whole time I was trying to get the FOIA, I was trying to keep up with the lawsuits, I was still trying to figure out if there was a way to save my PIP money, but there wasn't. After I was still working on that, but then when they put me under arrest about 9 months later, 6 to 9 months later, under false arrest, all of my documentation, they knew ahead of time. Those people in Oregon and people in Washington, they colluded. They knew that I had to get my records together, and they knew what kind of time frame I was looking at, and when the statutes of limitations expired. And I was very close to the end of the statute of limitations. So rather than allow me to get all my documentation together and to also give this story to the FBI, suddenly I've got, obstruction of justice. And this just keeps sliding down here. I don't know, maybe if I hold it tighter around my head. So anyway, after basically, okay, so then, the whole, then I was pregnant, and they finally dropped the idea of trying to force me into a plea bargain for this fraud case. And they only removed the restraining order with my grandparents after it was impossible for me to get my personal injury money and get to my legal records and sort things through and give information to the attorney that was handling the case at the time. So I lost everything because of obstruction of justice and felonies committed by people doing favors for people, and they were definitely felonies. And it definitely cost me. It didn't just cost me the amount of money that I lost then, and which I would have been awarded. It cost me my lawsuits, which I would have won, and it would have, restoring my reputation. It cost me my college. And then I had accruing damages. I've had damages ever since because of repeated use of the Willamette Week article used against me by people, even in the FBI, using it as some kind of, quote-unquote evidence of how weird I am, or, criminal, or maybe nuts that they can share with people. So by that time, I was raped again. I was forced out of all money, and the only reason why I think they didn't continue to target me is because I was pregnant. so initially, for just a short time, they weren't targeting me. But they had a lot of people trying to take my baby from me already. And then, as I say, Dr. Butler acted like he was... I had this feeling that he was trying to set me up to look like I was a drug user while I was pregnant, to make an excuse for taking my son from me. And I think I have further confirmation of that idea, that that's possibly true, by something that he later did as well. So, I was working with, then I was, Dr. Butler was the first doctor who then said, these people are not treating you well, or, let's make sure you have pain treatment for your migraines. So he had me sign what was called a pain contract. And it was basically an agreement with the hospital that should I show up to the emergency room with a migraine, they were to treat me with 10 cc's of morphine or 20 cc's of morphine if needed. And I wasn't a drug user at all, and I'm a very lightweight person. And the severity of the migraines, just so you can have an idea of how badly the military and NASA were torturing me. The severity of the migraines was bad enough that that one time 10 cc's did work, and it controlled the pain, but a couple of times I had to have 2 shots, so it was 20 cc's. It was 2 shots of morphine, which I don't think is, there are people who are on extremely high levels of things all the time, but the migraines were extremely severe and completely unbearable. They were so bad that when I was in the state of Oregon and a woman was saying, maybe we can try a shot to the back of your head, I don't like any kind of pain whatsoever, and when I'm not being tortured or when I don't have a migraine, the idea of somebody putting a needle in any part of my body like that, especially the back of my head, would have me running out of the room. But I was in such extreme pain that it really wouldn't have mattered if somebody had a mallet and said, we're going to knock you on the head. I probably would have said, okay, if you think that'll help, because it was so severe. So her idea of putting this huge needle into the back of my skull to quote-unquote numb muscles and see if that worked. I didn't have any kind of anesthesia or anything, obviously. I just didn't care. I was in extreme pain. So this was the time, when I was pregnant, finally, Dr. Butler acted like, that he was this reasonable doctor who was going to treat my pain, which I appreciated. And then the migraines did stop. And it was, I actually got tortured at a barbecue with some friends. I was there with my son, and it was the first time that I recognized and can remember having a really unusual, very strange kind of lower back pain. And it was the exact same back pain that my son and I both suffered when we then moved to East Wenatchee. And I think it's possibly some kind of ultrasound